17th, 7:17 p.m. on Thursday, May 16th. I will call the Subcommittee on Personnel meeting to order. We have one item on the agenda this evening. It is Order 24-1009156, proposed ordinance amendment to Chapter 125 by deleting Section 10C, granting the mayor the authority to waive any two steps of the salary schedule, and to also delete Section 18A4, allowing the mayor the authority to grant an additional week of vacation time effective at the time of employment for all non-union personnel. We received a letter from City Council President Ossing. Dear Honorable Councilors, in connection with the above referenced item, enclosed, please find a proposed ordinance amendment. I will be available to discuss this matter with councilors during the committee review process. As this is such time, Mr. President, I would offer you the floor to make some remarks about this ordinance. James.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, councilors. So the current ordinance, as it says now, Section 125.10, allows the mayor to waive any two steps at time of hiring. And also, Section 125-18 allows the mayor to increase one additional week of vacation at time of employment. So the proposed change is to remove both these sections and restore the ordinance to its prior status, which would require council approval if the mayor wants to change a starting step or add vacation. So again, take out basically what we put in. So basically, this restores the council authority that was given away. In my personal opinion, I think we did it under the COVID moment back in 2020. So just giving you a timeline, in October of 2020, which was in the heat of COVID, the mayor sent down a letter saying he'd like to have the authority to waive steps and add vacation. Personnel committee took it up. It was reported out of personnel. It was advertised in the council in January of 2021, approved the ordinance change by a vote of 9-2. So in the COVID era, we were looking to move quickly, and we didn't really explore the use of special council meetings that I'll get into in a moment. But what we basically did was we took away the council's authority. That was authority that we had to make those changes because we are the appropriating body, and we gave it up. And I'm going to admit, I made a bad decision. Again, if we did this again, I wouldn't have supported it. I'd advocated for a sunset clause back then, but there was no support for the sunset clause to basically try it and see how it worked. So I believe it's really important for the council to get back our authority that we had and we've now given away. Our council secretary will tell you that we should not be ever giving up any of our authority. In this particular case, we did. I don't think we did it with any bad intentions. But since then, what I've learned as being president, we have the ability to call meetings within 48 hours. So the argument that, hey, it takes too long for the council to move because they got to wait for a regular meeting really is not a valid one. We now have the ability, and we've shown it. We've had meetings at 7 a.m. on a Friday morning to get stuff done if we really need to get something done. So that really isn't the right argument to say why these should stay in here. We have the ability to move quickly if it's deemed to need to move quickly. This is not an reflection on any administration. It's really just restoring the council appropriation and oversight that should not have been given away. And I think if the councils reflect back on what we did, my personal opinion, hey, I voted the wrong way. So I recognize that, and I have no opinion stating that and trying to correct what I believe was a bad decision. The ordinance was properly advertised. It was listed in the Metro West on May 13th. So it has been properly advertised, and pending any further discussion or any comments, Mr. Chair, I'll be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll start by opening this up to comments from members of the Personnel Committee. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I remember this extremely well. I thought this was a step in the right direction, fundamentally, whether or not it was COVID or not. So let me be the alternative perspective to this. I spent a lot of my career in high tech, and I worked at two high tech companies where basically It took me 5 years to get 3 weeks vacation, okay? One is because I started working there at 19, and I got it at 23. The other one, I was in my late 20s, and 5 years later, I was able to get 3 weeks vacation. When I went and I got my MBA and I was negotiating as effectively an executive, a leadership position in an organization, one of them was flat out, I'm getting 3 weeks vacation. Are you gonna match that? And they did it in a heartbeat, okay? Another one, it's like, look, I've been in the career, you know, this is a situation where this would be used when we're talking about someone who has decades of experience. This should not be, I agree, this type of negotiation terms should not be someone who's fresh out of college, new to a career, or anything else like that. But when you find someone who has worked 10, 20 years of experience doing what they're going to be hired for, then they're looking at a way of compensation which is at a different scale than someone who's a newbie. And I think that's why I saw this perspective as being an important part of that. Because I think that someone who has 20 years of experience, you know, if they're looking around, they're shopping around, looking at different options, you know, that 3rd week of vacation is actually a very important part of that. Also, you know, the additional pay gets you some negotiations to talk about trying to increase it. This is not something that should be used, and you know, someone who's fresh, you know, new job, new career, but when someone has that type of decades of experience, coming in as a base level, it just doesn't make any sense. And that's how I saw it when it was originally proposed. I still agree with that. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in reviewing this proposed amendment to the ordinance, I had a lot of things to consider, and I like to try to be as consistent as possible. And the other night when we were having our budget meeting, one of the considerations that really struck me is when President Ossing had made the mention of when we are considering certain items or changes, we're not considering the individual, we're considering the position as a whole, whether it's right now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now. And in considering this particular amendment, some of the things I have to take into consideration is my own responsibility as a counselor, and what does it mean to be part of the legislative body of the city. And, you know, while in the private sector, when we're hiring people, promoting people, there are different sources of revenue. It relies more on their own profitability. For us, our source of revenue, it comes from the community. And so I do feel a responsibility to the taxpayers. And with what President Ossing also just said, being able to have a meeting within 48 hours, it really does take away that worry about, you know, it could take more than a month to, you know, vet and get a qualified candidate in. Right now, I know we're also in the middle of taking a look at all of our salaries in the city, and there's a study being done, which I believe will be complete by the end of the calendar year. And so some considerations I was going over, and I'd love to hear the opinion of others, whether they're on the committee or non-voting members, is back to the idea of a sunset clause, like President Ossing had mentioned. Do we allow it for a certain amount of time to come until potentially the salary studies are back and we start looking at the compensation? Do we maybe adjust something in a way of perhaps not allowing the step change but allowing the vacation? Those are just a couple of things that I'm just trying to find a way to allow us to be able to attract and hire qualified candidates, but at the same time, just kind of stay consistent in my line of thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. So before we go much further, I do want to note the mayor is out of town at the Mass Mayor's Conference, so was unable to be here tonight. He did send the council a letter, and members of the committee, he sent a packet. I did tell him I would read the letter, and I am regretting not having seen the letter before he sent it, for it is 4 pages long and full of some good information, but this will be available publicly to be able to be read. I would summarize, obviously, the mayor is in support of keeping this authority that has been extended through the ordinance that we did pass back during the COVID times that President Ossing was mentioning. There's a good historical record here of why we did this, what it was done. I will note that the mayor was the chair of the Personnel Committee at the time. He must have had excellent foresight to extend these authorities to the office that he now holds. There are a couple of things that I will just highlight for folks. He does acknowledge and point out which municipalities between mayors and town administrators have the authority to waive these steps without going to their legislative bodies, and he does the same with vacation time, and notes as we would expect in what we heard back in 2020, you know, that this does provide a certain amount of flexibility to the mayor while going forward to negotiate with new hires. The other piece that I do want to highlight, because I think it's helpful, we talked about it a little bit at the budget hearing the other night, and I had asked the mayor earlier if he could let us know when this has been used, and he does point out early in the letter he has used Ordinance 125-10, which is the waiving of steps as part of the salary ordinance. He has used that twice, once for the library position that we discussed the other night, and then for the Human Resources Director who has recently been appointed.
Can I make a point of information?
Please.
Those are the 2 people he's hired so far.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
And then he has also used Ordinance 125-18A4, which is the vacation, the allowing the mayor to provide an employee with an extra week vacation, and that has been used 3 times since he took office for his staff up in the mayor's office and also for the Human Resources Director. So I do want to point that out, and this letter will be available for the public if they would like to read it. I would like to just kind of build on to what Councilor Brown said. You know, as someone who voted for it as well, I am a bit conflicted. I thought this was, despite concerns I had when we took this vote, I thought it was the right thing. Hiring is incredibly difficult in the public sector these days. I think it can be incredibly difficult depending on the sector across the economy these days. We see it at work on a daily basis, trying to bring people in, whether it is at the entry level or whether it is, you know, to lure them from the private sector, which is a very challenging thing to do on public pay schedules. It is challenging. This was an effort to kind of cut down on that time. We have certainly shown that we have the ability to call a meeting when we need to or when we want to. Which is very helpful. I think the times in which we've done it, they were extraordinary circumstances, which the majority of the council, if not every councilor, felt very strongly that we convene. I'm not looking to have any more 7 a.m. Friday morning meetings, but that said, if you buy the coffee, I'll be there. So I do have some conflicts of that because I don't like to see the council give up its authority. We have very limited places. We just went through the budget. We learned just how limited our authority can be in certain places. And so I think it is important that we do keep that. And it's not, for me, the part that I really struggle with, it's not the particular that we can't schedule a meeting fast enough. It's when we're trying to lure an employee, and in a competitive labor market, which this is, if an employee has 2 offers on the table, and they're going back and forth. My concern is that when we're in that particular situation and the mayor says, hey, I'd love to give you X, this is what I can do, or this is what I can ask for, I've got to go to my council, and this person already has an offer on the table. I do have some concerns that we would lose out on that person. I don't think we are talking about a dramatic swing in money here on the steps, which is why I supported it in the first place. It is more money, and that money is borne by the taxpayers, so I think we should always be judicious with it. That said, on the early steps, we're not talking about, I don't think, huge swings in dollars. One of the things, but that part I recognize that the council wants to keep control of. One thing that we see frequently is the amount of vacation that people get when they come into public sector. 2 weeks vacation, when we are out there in the rest of the world, what people are getting, it is very difficult to compete. That said, I preach the power of the pension to anyone who will listen when they want to get into public sector, but you know, the limited amount of vacation time does make people scratch their heads. And it is oftentimes worth more than a salary increase. So I do think maybe some flexibility here is warranted. I don't know if I voted for or against the president's notion for a sunset clause. I don't have that in front of me, but I think it is not a bad idea, which makes me think I probably didn't vote for it the first time, having a little bit of history under it. But some sort of sunset clause, I think, is something that we could use. We do keep talking about a salary study. We do need to look at how our employees are paid if we both hope to keep employees that can live near here, working here, and also pay them a wage that encourages them to come here and shows that we value them. That's going to take a while, and after that's done, this council's still going to need to act on changing the salary ordinances for what we are told is across the board. That's not going to be any easier than this vote. It's going to be a lot harder because we're going to start to talk about real dollars, because for years we have perhaps been underpaying some of our employees, and that's going to have a cost that comes with it. So that said, a sunset clause adding on to this is not a bad idea. To do something along the lines that maybe, this sunsets around the time when we're expecting to see this, and we can see. The other thing I would like to see, and it was mentioned the first time we debated this, is that if the mayor does continue to keep this authority, we should know every time it is enacted, and we should receive some sort of written notification that the mayor has exercised this authority, because we should know, and everybody should know. It's not a bad thing for the mayor, and I don't think any of us think it's a bad thing for when there are extraordinary circumstances, as noted in the ordinance, to be used. We want to get the best people in here that we can. But at the same time, we want to make sure that it is being used judiciously. So I have taken up enough oxygen in this room. I would like to open up the floor to any other members of the council who haven't had a chance to speak yet, and then we'll go back around for questions. Councilor Landers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I often wonder, are we missing out on people? Or in some ways, it seems like we have a turnover in some positions, in some departments. Are we losing people? Do we know that? I mean, it's hard to believe that someone would get up and leave a job here because they only get 2 weeks vacation and, and they want 3 or something. But, when you're hiring someone, as the mayor does, or department heads have input, perks do come up. Certainly if someone, not necessarily in a public job in the next town over or something, if they're getting 3 weeks vacation, they expect to get at least 3. But, Mr. President, we do have an option of changing that. So, in other words, everything isn't cast in stone. I don't know how long it would take, but if you're interested in hiring someone, and they're interested in coming, I'm not so sure if a couple of weeks would make that big a difference, really. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although I am not mentioned in the mayor's letter, surprisingly, I had voted against this. And although I did not go back and listen to the tape, I did, and I don't even think I reviewed the actual minutes of the meeting because there were multiple meetings discussing this from my memory. My concern was both the no sunset and the no notification to the council. And I think both of those things were issues that the council deemed not important and didn't include. I think that this has actually worked very well, and I may be in conflict for voting to remove it at this point, even with the new mayor, and although I would like to see, if it's kept, to add in the condition that we do get notified, as I think you mentioned. That's an important process that we have. I will point out a couple of things related to the concerns of Councilor Brown. It is subject to available appropriation. So typically when an employee leaves, they're at a higher step in the salary, so that money is in the budget already. There's no need to come and do a supplemental, so there's money that a mayor can play with, because typically an employee hired new is going to go to step one. They're not going to come in at step one because they are already making step one somewhere else. So I do believe that it is an issue coming, especially if you're coming from the private sector to the public sector. It's tough, and I understand why both mayors or any mayor would want the ability. The language is still there and would still be there, and I'm not sure why we kept both of them. There is the language about the council upon recommendation may approve. But then there's also that the mayor can just do it. So they sort of conflict with each other, and I'm not sure why we didn't get rid of B and just keep C. So I personally am conflicted, and I think a lot of this has to do with some of the discussion with the budget. Some has to do with just recent hires. Maybe, I'm not sure why. And I am not sure exactly how I feel on the whole matter. Thank you.
Do you mind if I just see if anybody else, Mr. President?
Not at all.
Does anyone else have any comments before we start circling back around? President Ossing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, a couple of things. I stand corrected. It wasn't 2 people he's hired, it's been 4 on the non-union side. And it sounds like he's used the item every single time. One of these things we were concerned about was the prevent favoritism or friendship. You bring your friends in and you give them a bigger boost than anybody else. None of these 4 positions were time critical. Right? There was nothing. There was an offer on the table for anybody to go anywhere else. Right? Why I say that is there was time if you really wanted to do that, come before the council, and we could turn that around, chop chop. Something you want to be aware of. So when you start here at the City of Marlborough, you get 2 weeks vacation, 6 personal days, 15 sick days, 12 legal holidays, the Friday off before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Eve, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. It's not like there's not a lot of time off in the City of Marlborough. All right? So what I'm asking is to restore what the council has had forever, that I think we made a mistake and took away. And you can see it's already being taken, in my view, advantage of, because these weren't time critical competing for other jobs. I'll let you decide, the individuals that were hired, how they relate with the mayor. I think it's pretty clear we need to have that authority reestablished with the council. And if it's a real needed item, we've demonstrated we can pull the council together in 48 hours and make a decision. I don't think it's going to impact hiring anybody. Unfortunately, Councilor Doucette, this is not the private sector, and it does not work anything like the private sector. Whether we like that or not, it's the public sector. And part of that checks and balances, as Councilor Brown eloquently stated, is for us to be the watchdog for the taxpayers' money that's being spent. And we've now given up that authority, and I think we should get that back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are there any other comments from any members of the Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much. Just so that I see this, I understand the difference between the private and public sector, okay? But I think that it's important that we attract talented people. And it's hard, you know, it's a tight labor market. So trying to get the right person is hard, okay? Having, you know, making sure that we know when this is being used, I think is important, which should have been included in the original proposal. I think that's a great idea. I think that, as we commented before, you know, it looks like our salary schedule might be underpaying, and we need to compensate for that. So I think that, you know, if we do get something as far as, you know, a change in payroll on a major scale, I think this can be part of that and get it cleaned up at this point. I don't think that it's anything that needs to be addressed immediately at this point, except for maybe some minor tweakings, like make sure they communicates when it's being done. I think that as far as if someone's negotiating for terms, whatever it would be, you know, having that flexibility is important, but I think we need to document it for the community. We just want to make sure we get the right people, the talented people, to come to the city. And you have a position, you want to make sure it's filled with the best person we can find. I don't think that's any different whether or not it's a private or public sector. And by not having any type of negotiation, we're going to lose talented people because they may go someplace else. And I don't think that makes any difference.
So,
Mr.
if I
President?
could, so again, if anyone can come up with an example where we've lost that talented person, I'd love to hear it. I have not heard that from the prior administration or this one yet. So I understand the fear factor, but I think that's an overreaction. And again, what I get down to, we're giving away our responsibility and our authority. And I don't think that's a good idea. I've reconsidered it, and I'm okay saying I made the wrong decision then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to, and I know none of us are saying this, and I do want to be clear to all the employees that already work for the city of Marlborough. We are grateful for an already successful and talented workforce. We are looking to compete in a different market, but I don't want to lose that through the thread. We have been very lucky to attract the personnel that we do have. I know we all feel that way. So that said, are there any other comments, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I was just going to
Councilor
say,
Doucette?
yeah, thank you. You know, I'd be curious to know how many times this was used with the prior administration, because I think we lost.
I don't, if I can, Mr. Chair, I don't, it got hired late, and
I know.
our administration didn't hire many people, so.
Yeah, under the bridge, I understand that. You know, I'm just curious to see how often that's been done. Because, you know, this is a new administration, so it'd be interesting to compare what was done in the, you know, current administration versus the prior administration. But I think that, you know, the whole issue of personnel and compensation is something that's being addressed at a broader view. This is going to be part of that. I'd rather wait until we find out what's going on with that. I do think having some, you know, provide the communication when it's used, you know, in what position, I think that's important. As far as negotiations and other negotiations, I don't think I've heard, you know, that type of stuff is somewhat confidential as far as what other negotiations are going on. So if I'm looking to, you know, if I'm looking for a company to negotiate, it's not necessarily something that is open to the public, that, oh, he's looking at Marlborough and, let's say, Groton, you know, or something like that. I'm not sure if that's public information. I'm just not sure, you know.
Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question just due to not being familiar with the particular rules around a sunset clause. If we were to propose a sunset clause, does it need to be a finite date, or is it something that could coincide with receiving the salary and compensation study information?
I mean, my understanding is you could do it in several different ways. I would recommend that if we are proposing a sunset clause, to remove authority from the administration, and the administration is the body that is presenting the salary survey, that we may not want to tie them together. I think we've been told by the end of the year, we're expected the Collins Center to finish that work. You know, so we could probably tie it somewhere around then. You could do that. You could do as you suggested, or you could do for a period of time after passage if that ordinance change would be adopted.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I would like to make a motion. I move to attach a sunset clause to allow the authority to remain as it is now, but to expire at the end of a calendar year, but also to amend that we, as a council, should receive written notice that the authority has been exercised.
Can I do a point of order or make a comment? I don't know if you want a second first. I guess I will ask, maybe it's up to legal to decide, but we have a specific ordinance in front of us that I'm not sure we can amend to that kind of language. You'd either have to deny this and then submit a new one that would have the language to amend what exists to add a sunset and notification, is my non-legal guess.
And then have it advertised, and then
have it advertised.
Point
and-
of order too, because this was advertised, right?
That is correct.
Yep.
Right, so we passed this as is. We can't edit it without advertising again. That's true. Better off denying it.
I guess a question for our secretary or the president, if this, instead of denying it, if this lays in committee, and another one is, another alternative is filed, is that another way to go about it?
That's the
Whether or not
committee's-
it's passed or denied, or it lays in committee, we can,
That's the
Councilor Brown could
that's-
still file.
That's the committee's decision. I mean, that's what you want to do. I mean, I'll be real clear. I'm supporting this, and I won't be supporting anything else.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with everything in consideration, I am going to move to approve the proposed ordinance amendment as written and have it go to the full council so that everybody could weigh in and give their opinion, because I think for me, it really does, it boils down to the authority and just staying consistent with, I'm not making a vote based on a person, I'm making a vote based on what I believe is in the best interest of the city and the people I represent.
All right, a motion being made and seconded to approve the ordinance as submitted. Any discussion, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? Carries 2-1. Can I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
A motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? All those opposed? We are adjourned at 7:50.
7:50.